I had watched the movie Up when I was working in Toronto, and I was so excited. I thought, oh my God, this is the best intergenerational movie I've ever seen in my whole life, because it's about simple things, right? They count cars and they eat ice cream and they're just buddies. I mean, mind you, a lot of crazy things happen. And I contacted Ed Asner, who was the voice of the elderly man in the movie. And I said, would you be a spokesperson for our society? And he said, oh, yes, I would. I'd love to. He said, we never even thought of Up as being an intergenerational movie.
Welcome to Aging Vibrantly, Conversations to Empower Seniors, an Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario podcast. I'm Marianne Rideout, the host of the show, where we amplify the voices of seniors who impart their expertise and wisdom to enhance our understanding of aging issues and ways of living a safe and fulfilling life with respect and dignity. In today's episode, Bridging the Gap, Building Generational Connections, we're going to explore intergenerational programs that promote understanding and mutual respect among generations that contribute to age-friendly communities and have proven to work in addressing ageism. In fact, intergenerational programs are valued and celebrated across Canada and internationally, with events held on Intergenerational Day in Canada each year on June 1st and during Global Intergenerational Week, recognized this year from April 24th to the 30th. We're honored to have a senior expert on intergenerational learning, Sharon Mackenzie, join us to share her wealth of knowledge and experience with us today. Before we begin, I want to introduce my co-host, Sherry Baker, who is a member of our Senior Advisory Committee. Sherry is a past Executive Director of the BC Association of Community Response Networks and is now an independent consultant providing one-to-one support to leaders and organizations. So Sherry, thank you for joining me today. Sharon is a true leader in building connections between generations. She's an intergenerational consultant, a writer, a researcher, and an executive director of Eye to Eye Intergenerational Society that was founded in 2008 with the purpose of bringing youth and older adults together across Canada. She's an educator for 30 plus years from kindergarten to university and is dedicated to creating intergenerational learning opportunities within the community. Sharon is a senior herself and has always looked to older adults for support and friendship in her personal life and work. That led her almost 25 years ago to initiate the Meadow School Project, a world-renowned compendium of international emergent research. This project was recognized by the World Health Organization in 2012, stating, "This project demonstrates forward-thinking advancements by Eye to Eye Intergenerational Society should be adopted worldwide." The mental, social, and emotional benefits of the Meadow School Project were so astounding that government ministries and departments in Canada, as well as community agencies, have been engaging Sharon for the past 20 years to provide workshops and write her research into supporting resources that prevent elder abuse. Her work stimulates initiatives that connect older adults and children, youth, breaking down isolation and loneliness in both generations. Welcome, Sharon. We're looking forward to speaking to you today. So welcome, Sharon, to our podcast today. I know Sherry and I are both looking forward to having a conversation about intergenerational connections with you. So I'm going to ask my co-host, Sherry, to start our conversation off today.
Thanks, Marianne. And Sharon, it's so lovely to see you. I know you and I have been friends now for a lot of years, and I have always been so interested and in awe of the work that you've been doing on intergenerational work for a very long time. My interest had been in elder abuse awareness and prevention, and how this had all worked, the work you were doing linked to the work that I was doing. So I think that what we would like to know, first of all, is how did you get started in this? How did you start to think about intergenerational work as having an influence on our communities and on the safety of all generations?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I think for so many of us, we have intergenerational relationships in our lives, and we don't really think about it. It's just part of our lives. And for me, that was the way it was. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family, and it started out in Calgary that I had a very elderly neighbor. And he was a great gardener, and I don't know what I would have done without him. He was my rock. And all through my life, I seemed to gravitate towards older people who became my mentors, my friends, my shoulder to cry on. And so when I started teaching about almost 40 years ago now, and I just automatically included seniors in our class, whether we were inviting grandparents in to do different activities with us, or we were going out to care homes to do a little presentation or interview seniors. And I never really thought too much about it. It was just, part of my life. And but what I realized when I was teaching was that when we walked away from the care home, or when the seniors went back from participating with us at the school, there was so much more that was untapped that we weren't allowing time for, we weren't allowing a presence of that intergenerational connecting. And so then I started the Meadow School Project, which ran for 10 years in an interior city in BC. And basically I took my grade 4, 5, 6, 7 class, usually 34 kids, and moved them into a temporary classroom in a care home. And we went every day for 2.5 months, and we combined our curriculum and our social activities, and then some community-based activities as well. And I went there kind of with the idea of breaking down stereotypes, because a couple things had happened in my immediate family. My parents, my step-parents, had moved into a senior facility. It was a condominium complex, and we were sitting on their deck one day, and a young person came walking by, and they both sort of sat up and said, "What's that young person doing in here?" And right away, they were very protective of their space. And I thought, wow, that is really weird, because one of the young people that walked through was actually about the same age as my eldest son, their grandson. And they were subletting within the residence. So that sort of really bothered me. And then I got home, and my other son, who was in high school, was really upset because there had been some home invasions in a neighboring city, and he had heard that on the news, and he was astounded that people would go in and upset seniors by barging into their houses and with not very good purpose in mind. And so I thought, wow, we really need to break down these stereotypes. So that's why I started the Meadow School Project, moving the class in for 2.5 months, temporary classroom. And we worked with the seniors for that 2.5 months. And then for the rest of the school year, one day out of every week, they either came to us or we went to them, and we continued the relationship. But what was really amazing, and I'll take this to my grave, it was so incredible that we had not even been there 2 or 3 days, and I realized that breaking down stereotypes was absolutely the least important of all the wonderful things that were happening. And it was like just popping open a jewel box, and suddenly there was all these things there, and you polished them up, and it was just incredible. So that sort of led to my interest in looking at intergenerational as a movement, as something that we were kind of taking for granted. I mean, in lots of cases, you have seniors and young people together in the same room, family reunions or whatever, but how often do they really connect and take that time to really, be part of one another's lives and sort of understand what it's like being a senior, what it's like being a young person?
That's so interesting. And you say that there was so much more that came out of it besides, your initial thought around breaking down those stereotypes. So we know there's many benefits of creating space for the interconnections with bringing younger people and older people together. So based on, that personal experience, as well as all the other projects that you've been involved in, research, and I know you've been across this country doing other initiatives. What have been the positive outcomes of these intergenerational programs, and are they mutually beneficial for both younger and older, or just older adults?
Wow, that's a huge question. The benefits are unbelievable. I often say that if I could address the whole country, the governments of the country, what I would say to them is, if we had a set intergenerational opportunity for every youngster and every older person in the country, we probably would cut down on healthcare costs by about 80%. Because as all of us know, isolation and loneliness is a huge issue in healthcare. So the main benefit from my point of view, and I've preached this, as Sherry said, from one side of the country to the other, the main benefit is that it improves health. And it's such an easy, comfortable, happy, fun, and really inexpensive way to do that. And so for a lot of the projects that we've done, they've been really simple things. And again, just taking that glass and pointing it, the magnifying glass, and pointing it on the relationships between young people and older people, and saying, wow, there, just as I found at Coldstream Meadows, there's so much more here than what meets the eye. And when you say, is it mutually beneficial? It's really funny because I was sort of working with a lot of my research after Meadow School Project in the area of elder abuse prevention. The focus was really on elders, and I kept saying, wait a minute, this is really making a huge difference for young people, because young people are isolated and lonely too, and all you have to do is be a teacher and see how many kids hang around after school just because they want to be near people, and they're not allowed to have kids at their home because their parents are both working. And that was the other thing, that parents are not at home or grandparents are not available after school, and they're lonely and they just want somebody to just hang out with, just to talk with. So it is definitely beneficial. How is it beneficial other than just breaking down isolation, oh my goodness, that's such a huge thing, breaking down isolation and loneliness, because that's that whole core of mental health. But physically, it's better. The seniors, even through COVID, which was probably our toughest time in terms of intergenerational relationships, people got up out of their chairs to go to the windows to watch the kids do things. They got up out of their chairs. And as you get older, sometimes that's a big feat for the day, is to get out of your chair and go someplace. When we had more opportunities, I know I just finished a project in New Brunswick a couple of years ago, and we did talks, or it was talk and walk. So people would walk with the seniors and so forth, and or kids would walk with seniors. So all of those things are, mental aspect of it is really huge. Physical aspect, the social aspect, just socializing, and then the whole emotional thing. And I think that's the one thing that is really interesting. I often had been upset when I was teaching, because it seemed that we always were doing things for the kids. And I really don't think you build personal responsibility or purposefulness by doing things for other people. Not that kindness is not, it's important, but I think doing it for them because you think they're not capable of doing it, but looking at that in terms of doing it with them. And I actually presented to the National Seniors Council, and I waited for a long time for my turn, and I went to stand up, and I saw their banner, and it said National Seniors Council, working for seniors. And I was right away really upset, because I thought, I'm a senior. I want to work with you. I don't want to be worked for. Like, I'm not some kind of a lame duck sitting here. So I think that the whole idea with intergenerational is it gives purpose. And when you bring the young people and the older people together, they suddenly, if they've been feeling kind of, my life is kind of, where is it at? I don't know. I'm not really needed anywhere. Nobody really is hearing me. Nobody's really noticing me. And suddenly they come together and they have that friendship and they have a purpose. And so it empowers them. And we did lots of projects that really were very empowering for both seniors and kids. So that's a very long answer to your question.
I'd like to add something to that, because there's an educational component in there too. And you find that the young people are helping the older people learn about computers, or the young people or the older people, they're helping each other with language if they're new Canadians, and it's a huge. And did you find that in your work as well, Sharon?
For sure. And I think there's one thing that, young people are always sort of attacked for the fact that they have expectations, that they think they should have all of these things. The one thing that's really awesome about the senior to the youth aspect is when seniors start talking about what life was like before internet and everything that we know, all of a sudden there's this real appreciation for history. And that I think that's really, really important, is knowing where you've come from, knowing whose shoulders you're standing upon, that we just didn't get here by our own volition and magically. So I think the learning is huge going that direction. But as well, it's really fun. We've had lots of times when we've had the kids and the seniors both bring things to an event, and the seniors will be going, well, how do you use this phone, or how do you use all of these changers for my TV or whatever? And so that skill set and just kind of understanding where they're at. But then on the other hand, like I say, the seniors coming, one of the best ones we've had is the lapidary club of seniors and a naturalist club, and having these people that are just have been educated through a lifelong experience. They're not, they don't have a degree or anything, but they really do. They have a degree in natural science and natural history, and they share that with the kids, and that's invaluable. So yeah, the education piece is absolutely huge.
Yeah, I know it's interesting to see that you were talking about the benefits and how it makes people feel internally. And I think it's that part that's really hard to measure for when people are looking at how did it, what happened in the end result, because it's that emotional impact is so rewarding internally, and which shows out externally because you're happy, you're going to be more moved. I was just listening to a program the other day on CBC, and they were talking about volunteering and how sometimes it is difficult to get individuals, but they had a call in, and there were so many older adults calling in, and one woman had talked about her volunteering at the schools and how rewarding it was and how the kids enjoyed her coming to the school. And I just thought, it's so great. And I know so many seniors volunteer in those kind of positions, and having that opportunity just creates more of those kind of connections that we're trying to instill. And I think it's that understanding of what it's like to be aging, because our media portrays so much negativity, or kids overhear some of that. So this can really dispel some of those myths about, even talking with grandparents, right? Because they may have not heard the negative stuff, but then that you don't want that to influence their interactions with their, the people that they are close to or communicating to, whether that's family or in public. So these really do break down some of those barriers that you were talking about. But building on the part you talked about, isolation and loneliness, not everybody's able to get out to some of these programs based on maybe, or have intergenerational connections. They may not have grandchildren in their family, or they may live far away from families, with families moving away for work and for other purposes, or could be isolated because they can't have transportation, they don't drive. So are there other ways or programs that you know about that are available for people who may not be able to physically get out or connect with younger people in the same traditional way that we've just been talking about?
Well, wow, there's so many things that I'd like to comment on in what you've just said. You talked about not having grandparents, and like there's people who don't have grandparents around or whatever. And it was very interesting. I had a student in my program at Meadow School Project, and he had both sets of grandparents in the town that we lived in. And every Sunday, he and his three brothers and sisters had Sunday dinner with his grandparents, both sets of grandparents. And so we'd be time to go to Meadow School, and all of a sudden Jeremy comes charging into the room and he'd say, when are we leaving? When are we leaving? I can hardly wait. I'm going to go out and line up for the bus. And I said to him one day, I said, Jeremy, this blows me away. You have such a great relationship with your two, other your grandparent sets. And, and yet you love this program, which I'm thrilled with. And I said, I'm so surprised by that. And he said, they do come every Sunday for dinner, but they never come to see just me. And I thought, wow. So just I've got 3 kids, and we go to visit the grandparents Christmas time. You know what it's like. There's crazy activity and everybody's chatting with everybody, but do you really connect child to grandparent? So I think, that really is a big piece of it. How do we make these connections? I chose the school and the care home because I had 2 set groups of people that I knew were going to show up. So that made it really nice, because I had the seniors who I knew were in the care home, and I had names, and I had phone numbers, and I had contacts. I had the same for the children. So it made it kind of easy. So whenever you're looking at, whether it's a church group, whether it's Boys and Girls Club, whether it's, a fitness club, a running track club, indoor track club, or indoor soccer, it doesn't really matter what it is. If you've got groups that are already preset, it's really much easier to connect them, because one of the things that's really important, I think, that I learned was that this one-off is you leave wanting so much more opportunities to connect. So by having the situation where you have, say, a book reading, a book club, and you have a journalism club at the high school or the middle school, and you have those two groups coming together, you can do it on a regular basis. Maybe it's only once a month. Maybe it's only once every 2 months, who knows? But at least you have those two sets of people to bring together. So where do you find these opportunities? You make them. You have to make them yourself. And that's what I've been fighting for the last 20 years, is trying to get people to see that, first of all, it's really simple. Because one of the things that you need to do, and I know we probably will talk about this a bit more later, but one of the things you really need to do is look at what your own life is about. Are you already doing something? Do you belong to a choir, for example? Do you belong to a book club or a gardening club? Well, gee whiz, there's kid choirs, there's youth choirs, and there's, the kids are always planting things, especially at the school. So why not do them together? And that's one of the mandates that we really focus on with our society, with the Eye to Eye Intergenerational Society, is that you don't do different things. You just do things differently. So how do you find those things? You find them in yourself, and you connect with other people who have an interest. And honestly, it's crazy how exciting it is, because once people get involved, it just grows. It's fun, and they want to do it. They want to do it again, and they want to do it more. And so looking to what's happening in your community is really, really important. Certainly, if you have an idea of something that you'd like to do, just seek out the school, the care home, the seniors community center, almost any place where you can find people that are collectively working with either youth or seniors. And I might mention that I've always focused my work on youth. So children that are anywhere from babies to first year university, that age group, and then older people 55 plus. And intergenerational now in Canada is used for a wide range of, it could be younger seniors and older seniors, but I do either end of the aging spectrum. And the reason that I am really devoted to that is that I think it's like an insurance plan. You're really investing in the future, because
So
kids,
true.
we have such a fear of aging, unfortunately, in this country. And that's probably why we make jokes about it, because it makes us think that we're not as afraid of getting older, our parents getting older, whatever. So by having young people involved with senior people, it takes that away. They somehow see these people as friends. They see they have full and productive lives. They have had full and productive lives in a lot of cases, and they're able to share and able to have fun. So for me, intergenerational really means that younger group with the older group, and bringing those together to, like I say, it's like an insurance plan for the future. And I've seen the students that I had in Meadow School Project, totally different way of treating their aging own parents now, their grandparents, and their own aging and their own fear of aging, which is, I think, really, really critical.
So this is an
I think that's
segue. Oh, do you want to go ahead?
No, I was just going to say, years ago, I did a project with an older adult. We went into a high school, and they were going out to do some volunteering with a part of their project for our programs at school, was to do, they had one day that they would spend time with the senior and help them around the house, do maintenance things outside that they might not be able to do themselves. So we did a pre-education just to find out what their knowledge was. And this was around elder abuse prevention at the time. And just to give them knowledge, but also information around aging. So they we did a pre-education, went out and did their work. And then it was around Christmas time. So then after we came back, we did a debrief, and we brought the senior back. And it was so amazing to hear the students say at Christmas time, well, I had much more connection with my grandparents. I took more time and patience. I was at an appointment where somebody was getting services and they were being ageist, and I called them out. Like it was so impactful by one little session that we did for maybe an hour with those students. And you would hope that had an impact more long-term than just that 1 month. But it just takes those little initiatives that we just started ourselves. As you were saying, Sharon, we just sort of thought outside the box, and the impact was tremendous. So go ahead, Sherry. Sorry.
No, that's fine. But there's a segue in there, and it's still there about, because community, we all live in community, although many of the older adults and children are isolated within that community. So many communities, many of them now have been involved in the age-friendly movement. So, which was started really at the municipal level to kind of ensure that the parks were accessible and the walking trails and all that kind of thing. But it's much more than that, much more than that. And I mean, I've been involved in my own community and been involved a little bit of it in a broader sense than that. So I think there's an obvious link between, Sharon, with what you're talking about, what you've been doing with intergenerational and the work with the age-friendly movement. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, I know when I talked with representatives from the UN and particularly in Victoria, I got quite involved with age-friendly communities, and I asked them to please put the word all age in front of it because, yeah, I mean, we talk about ageism, and I've worked with, research partners, and they've really been focused on ageism as something that refers to seniors. But, there's ageism for young people, towards young people as well. And I see it because I've had 3 kids of my own and then all these wonderful students that I've been involved with. And it's amazing how many times they are affected by ageist attitudes as well. So I think the all age friendly community is really critical. And in saying that, I think it's really important that every single one of us, and how do we do this? This is the tricky part. Every single one of us has to take it on as our mandate to make a movement toward making community a verb and not a noun. Because, I mean, you can have all the community that you want, small C community, but unless something's really happening within that community. Here's a really, I just kind of random, and I love it that this is sort of like a fireside chat. Here's a really cool thing that happened. So simple. There's a town in the southern Okanagan, and there was 5 gentlemen that went for a walk every day, and they usually walked past the high school about the same time as it was going in. And this particular community was famed in BC because it had the best Elvis impersonator in the world. So this fellow, his wife was a seamstress, and he asked her if she would make 5 Elvis vests. So they were fringed and whatever. And these 5 fellows would put these Elvis vests on, and every morning when they went for the walk, they would stop at the high school, just at the bottom of the stairs, each one at a different door. And they had obviously talked with the principal and staff about this. And they would just greet the kids as they came in. Such a simple thing. Such a simple thing. It was absolutely raved about. It went on for several years. Sadly, the man who had kind of started it, he passed away and the whole thing fell apart. But what an easy thing to do. And how many times do you see groups of 3 or 4 adults, older adults that are not, maybe not in the workforce at the point when the kids are heading off to school, they could just be at the door and all they'd have to say is, "Good morning, how are you doing?" And what a difference that makes, and the friendships that grow from that. So I think, again, getting back to your comment about community, Sherry, I think we have to start thinking about community as a verb and not a noun. And I've been harping on that for years. And unfortunately, government says that they want to see it as a verb, but they really treat it as a noun. And so unfortunately, it's slow going. And it really depends on organizations like yours and, people like you who make those efforts to get started. Because as I said, over and over again, once you get going on it, you can't stop. It's just awesome. So much fun.
And I think there's sorry, go ahead.
So the
Sherry.
age friendly in my community was started by the Seniors Advisory Committee. Mm-hmm. So awesome. Although there had been efforts made years previous to that around the children and so on, and families, mums with strollers and those kinds of things, but we actually got the age friendly communities designation, and then there was some funding attached to that. And so now they've added Alzheimer's friendly or dementia friendly as part of the age friendly at the municipal level. And the idea, I'm not sure that they actually do it, but the idea is that they consider the decisions they make within that framework. So when they're making a decision, it's as simple as how long should the walk light be on in an intersection so that you can get across safely. Those are the kinds of things that at a municipal level, and how they build their parks and their recreation centers, and how do they encourage communities, neighborhoods, streets, and so on to get together and get to know each other at all ages. So those are the kinds of things in there. It ties very much, in my opinion, in with the work you're doing, Sharon, as far as an intergeneration.
Sure.
It's layering it onto there.
Yeah, and I think the benefits of having both organizations such as that approaching this, as well as individuals who have just a passion for it or an interest or whatever, that's what makes the whole picture, and that's what's going to make it last. And I think for people who might be listening to this podcast or watching it, I think it's really important to realize that if you don't belong to a group like that, or it's more than you can cope with trying to get a group organized, really think about the simple things. And again, getting back to the walking and connecting with people, or the book club where the seniors read a book and the kids read the same book, and they come together and have milk and cookies or tea or whatever, and chat about the book. We had a project in BC that I thought was absolutely wonderful. It was actually, interestingly enough, run by one of my students who became the curator for the art gallery. But she was very interested in intergenerational. So she had senior artists connect up with sometimes their grandkids, but sometimes just younger kids in the community. And together they created a piece of art, whether it was a painting or a sculpture or whatever. And that was great. But then what they did for the art show was they had those mounted, and then they had the children individually write what it was like working with a senior on that project, and the senior write what their experiences was. And they had those two mounted beside the piece of work. It was awesome. You look at the work and you think, oh, well, that's really interesting or really nice. But then you'd read what each of them was thinking, and they had such a grand time. So, so many times it's really simple things that you can do that can make that difference. Buddy benches, in Ottawa, we had a thing with an intergenerational bench, where a bench was placed downtown, and on it had a plaque that said it was for seniors and for young people to sit on and chat. Those kind of simple things. In New Brunswick, they're doing what they call, speed chats. And they have a lot of new Canadians that are coming to their center. And so they connected the younger people with the older people, and they literally do it like speed dating. So they go to a table and they talk with each other for 5 minutes, and a bell goes, and then they all move to a different table. And they've had so much fun with that. So again, really simple things, but you just have to reach out and make an effort to do them.
Yeah, it's just sort of building on your comment about the art gallery where people, leave comments about their experiences. I know the study that you did in New Brunswick, there was a quote by one of the youth saying that how inspiring it was. And they indicated that this was one way of finding out that youth and seniors have a lot in common. I'm convinced that this was the best way to combat ageism, kind of getting back to a previous discussion that we just had. So in your experience, having these intergenerational relationships, have they supported efforts in combating or addressing ageism and the abuse of mistreatment of older people because of building respect and, caring for older people?
Mm-hmm, hugely. Well, I look back to the Meadow School Project, which went on from 2000 to 2010. And there was that culture of don't speak to strangers in the grocery store, right? And of course, quite often, not always, but you might have a senior that would want to speak to a child, and suddenly the child just moves away and walks the other direction. So how do you overcome that? What we found, and this was a follow-up of our research on all the projects, is that seniors were more willing to chat with children, and children were more willing to chat with seniors. And one of the ways to break that down is by having names. Like if you live next door to an older person in the city, or perhaps in your apartment building or whatever, quite often you don't know their name, which is a sad comment on our whole society. But as long as you know their name, suddenly they're different. And I mentioned something about, I had one of my students came to the care facility and she had purple hair. And it was one of our very first visits, and the seniors were disgusted, like, oh, honestly, what's happening to youth today? And that's just so ridiculous. But then later on, they learned her name, and they realized she was just a really nutty kid, and she had taken purple Jell-O and put it in her hair, and she thought it was really funny. And so suddenly, their comment was, oh, wow, look at Penny. She's so funny. Like, she's such a funny girl. But before, like just maybe a couple of days before, it was, oh, those, youth of today. So I think, when people get names, what they're named, I think that is a great way to break down ageism, going both ways. I think just carrying that knowledge and that feeling in your heart when you leave a relationship So say, for example, you've presented a song, or maybe it's a music teacher who's brought her students to the care facility or to some community center to do their practice and their lessons, and seniors just sit about and watch or listen to them. But the whole idea is that when you leave that, you have this feeling in your heart that you have something in common with them. And I think that's really important. And, one of the things that really is a lock-in when it comes, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to ageism, we tend to think about seniors and there's changing social circles. Like they'll wake up in the morning, and I wake up in the morning and I'm never quite sure who my senior friends are going to be and who my community is going to be. It could be my neighbor across the street had a heart attack. If you have a spouse, it could be that your spouse has had to move to care, whatever. So constantly, as an older person, you're never really sure what your social circle is going to look like in another week or another month or whatever. Well, kids are very much like that as well, because, a lot of the parents are very mobile with jobs. Sometimes it's relationships and they're coming apart and coming back together in different family formations. So their social circles are really kind of tenuous as well, let alone just the hormonal things and so forth that happens with kids. But you bring the seniors and the kids together, and suddenly they have their very own social circle. And whether they talk about how they're feeling about their social circle and actually address that, or whether they just come together and make a new social circle, that, is really critical. So I think all of those things break down ageist attitudes going both ways. I think it's really important to realize that this is a reciprocal action here. I'm probably not answering your questions, right? I'm just going in circles.
Oh, it was perfect. It was excellent. I mean, I totally agree.
Yeah. We haven't talked about this a lot in this particular podcast, but people have their own internal ageism. Like, older, I think those of us who are older, like Sharon and you and I, we've been, we have to be careful that we're not saying things like, well, I'm too old for this, or I can't do that anymore. And, oh no, that wouldn't work because I can't do it. And it's a lot of, I can't going on. And I think with young people, you get the same kind of a thing. I'm not old enough to do this. I need more experience. I need more schooling. I need this. I need that. And I think as a society, we need to start to look at this and say, we are all given certain gifts. We all have our good points and our struggles and our challenges and so on as individuals, but it's not necessarily age related. What do you think about that?
Well, the one thing I do think about a lot is that aging is the only thing we all do have in common. Right. And it doesn't matter whether you're a little kid or whether you're a teenager and struggling with all the teenage things, or whether you're, a young adult or whatever. We're all aging. So we all know we're going to be there at some point in time. I hear what you're saying about, using age as an excuse for not being able to do something. But I think what I kind of tend to look at is more how the empowerment piece can come in, how by connecting with somebody else, you are empowered. I mean, even I can not feel great in the morning when I get up, and then my grandkids all arrive hungry at 2:30, and suddenly I'm baking and cooking and making smoothies and running around and fixing, putting new Band-Aids on things. And I stopped thinking about how I didn't feel great in the morning. And we found that at Coldstream Meadows. I mean, there were seniors there that would cancel doctor's appointments in order to go and get their hair done so that they look nice for the kids. And it was a lot of it is that we tend to focus on what we can't do. And that's just such a vicious cycle if we get into that. Whereas I think when you're with young people, or if you're older people with young people, or vice versa, there's just a comfort zone there that you can develop. And I think that then makes you feel like you're empowered, and well, not anything is possible, but a lot of things are possible, right? And I have to say, I'm 76, and I don't think twice about asking my grandsons to help me up if I'm stuck somewhere or whatever. But then there's times when I help them get up too, because they're stuck, right? Whether it's in a snowbank or in their snowsuit or whatever. So I think really looking to intergenerational as being an empowering opportunity is really important.
Now, Sharon, you started the Intergenerational Day 14 years ago. Can you tell us how and why you decided to make this day a national event? It's on June the 1st, right?
Yes, well, it was June 15th, Elder Abuse Awareness Day, that so we add that really started this whole thing. I was working with Elizabeth Podnix at the time, and she was very focused on that day, and she wanted the kids to do something. She wanted me to work with intergenerational groups, well, mostly with the youth, to try and come up with some ideas to try and break down ageism and try and make people more aware of and of prevention, how important prevention of elder abuse is, and what some of the factors were. And June 15th is really a rotten day for schools. I mean, they're thinking about summer holidays. The high school kids they've got exams coming up, et cetera, et cetera. So it was really hard to gather youth's attention to focus on June 15th. And so I was working in Newfoundland at the time at the collegiate there in St. John's. And I said to the kids, I said, what are the chances we take June 1st and make it Intergenerational Day Canada? And what we could do on that day is really focus, do all the things that we want to do that focus on the positive aspects of working with older people, and then ferry that forward so that people could help us on the 15th. And I'll just give an example. So one of the groups went to a local coffee shop and they got about 100 coffee sleeves and they brought them back. And on the first, they had adhesive paper and they had typed on Elder Abuse Awareness Day, June 15th, a website, the Canadian website, it's a little bit of information and so forth. And then they took those back to the coffee shop. And on the 15th, June 15th, the coffee shop handed out the coffee with those labels on it. And they did the same for grocery stores. They had little handouts that they made up and decorated, and they took those to the grocery store and they put them in grocery bags as the shoppers came in. So basically, that was what the motivation was. And I used to tease Elizabeth that I hoped that my day would wipe out her day, because I said, if we really get this intergenerational thing going, maybe there'll never be any more elder abuse. And so that was sort of a little inside joke that we had. But what it really has helped us do is it has helped us focus across Canada on at least one day where you really say, what can I do today? And some of the events that go on across the country are really amazing. And over the 14 years that we've been at this, and it's not been easy, it's been like pushing a ball up a hill, because even trying to get cities to proclaim sometimes with all the things that are happening in the world, it's very difficult. They want to proclaim it, but legally they're not allowed to. So basically we've looked at groups, groups like yours. I mean, obviously the networks that you're both involved in have been really wonderful at helping push this forward. And it just gives that one focus day. I mean, it's right back to the Hallmark thing, Mother's Day or whatever it happens to be. It gives us one day to really aim for. And in New Brunswick, they've done some really wonderful things. They have a youth band or youth orchestra, actually. And on June 1st, that youth orchestra performs in care homes all over New Brunswick and St. John's or in St. John and Fredericton, et cetera. And I went to a couple of them last year, and they're just amazing. So just a celebration of the importance of youth and seniors. So that's where we're at. We're trying to get it turned into a national day, but I don't know. We're again uphill battle.
Well, and now April the 24th to the 30th was proclaimed the Global Intergenerational Week. Mm-hmm. Was this an outcome of the work that you've been doing with the Intergenerational Day?
Well, I think it's all a groundswell, Sherry, to be quite honest. I think that in my tenure in this focused on intergenerational, I've really felt that, and I think you mentioned it to me, I used to always go to the conferences and I was always the one saying, put intergenerational on the bulletin board, put it on a Post-it note, it's important. And now that's happening in gatherings, and I'm not the one who's doing it. So obviously the word is spreading, and, fortunately there's more and more people. Not as fast as I would like it, of course, but there's more and more people that are becoming involved. So I was aware that I've been working with a couple groups in the UK and also in Ireland. And then they had an organization where they could, carry it forward. Generations United in the States, they're fully funded by the Eisner Foundation. And so they've been going now for about 30 years. And it's amazing when you have government or solid funding, what kind of an organization that you can build, and just spreading the word alone is worth so much. Unfortunately, in Canada, we haven't been successful from that point of view. So we're doing it from the grassroots up. And we are getting there.
And I guess that's where it leads me to my last question, just in terms of your future. So, other countries are doing things maybe a little bit ahead of us, or have different funding or different organizations that are involved. What's your vision for the future? What would you like to see as your vision is for Canada when we look at intergenerational programs?
Well, the teacher is going to really, I put my teacher hat on right now for sure. My dream has always been, having witnessed what happened with my students in the Meadow School Project. And my dream has always been that every youth in Canada would have one opportunity every year for focused, respectful, purposeful connection with one senior. And whether you just picked a grade like grade 5 or 6 and said, this is going to be right across Canada, every student that's in grade 5 or 6, it's in the curriculum, you will have one day where you will connect respectfully and purposefully with a senior. And if you can just think about that, I see from the Meadow School Project, I ran it for 10 years. I had usually about 34 kids. So you look at the number of students that have gone out and how that has spread out to make a difference for people in terms of ageist attitudes, in terms of fear of aging, fear of dying, all that, how it's dissipated that and brought instead, honor and fun, enjoyment, and relationships, friendships. And so that really is my dream. And I think it's possible, but it's just a matter of having the resources, having the people actually that would go forward and do that. And, people are so busy nowadays that it's really hard to ask volunteers to literally commit to a full-time job for, who knows, like 2 or 3 years to get that going. But I think retired teachers associations would be, one place that that's something that they could tie into. Certainly school boards, school districts across the country. And the Toronto district, school district has actually proclaimed June 1st in perpetuity, and they did that probably 10 years ago. But, has there been benefits coming from that? And we need people to just say, hey, look at June 1st is coming up. What can we plan to do? What fun thing could we do for one day? Just get kids involved with seniors.
You can also do it. And it's the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the
it's endless. Yeah.
And the provincial organizations. And there's all kinds of places that
and it would pay such dividends back to them. That's people always say, well, what will I get out of it? Especially larger organizations and government groups. And as I addressed the federal government last year in January, a committee about intergenerational, I said, if you just would listen, and if you just get kids involved with seniors, it would be almost immediate that you could start seeing things change, because with suicide and addictions and so forth, that hits kids just as much as it hits older people. And if they've got somebody that they can talk to, somebody who can hear them, somebody who can see them, one person who eye to eye, and again, Ryan, it just dawned on me, one of the things you said was, how could we connect people? That's one thing that COVID did. It drove me crazy, COVID, because we were right in the middle of doing a hand-to-hand, eye-to-eye, face-to-face, involvement in New Brunswick with seniors and kids. And of course, bang, all of a sudden we were on screens. But that's one thing that it did show us, is it's possible to connect through screens. And a lot of people my age are not afraid to do it anymore, which maybe they would have been had COVID not happened. So I think there's just so much opportunity, and it's so positive. It's so positive. I just don't understand why it's not embraced by the whole world.
Well, I know that it's coming up, and we'll be planning something, whether it's with you and your group that you have across Canada that you collaborate with, that maybe we can organize another event online and engage more people in these conversations that we've had today to extend that, your passion and get more people on board to get involved and see if we can find some more leaders in our community. So we have one last question that we'd ask all of our guests, and that is, what advice would you give to someone to empower them to age vibrantly?
Get involved with young people. Make that step, whether it's your grandchild. And I had Ed Asner I had watched the movie Up when I was working in Toronto, and I was so excited. I thought, oh my God, this is the best intergenerational movie I've ever seen in my whole life, because it's about simple things, right? They count cars and they eat ice cream and they're just buddies. I mean, mind you, a lot of crazy things happen. And I contacted Ed Asner, who was the voice of the elderly man in the movie. And I said, would you be a spokesperson for our society? And he said, oh, yes, I would. I'd love to. He said, we never even thought of Up as being an intergenerational movie. But he said, I can see what you're saying. And so he said, tell me what you want me to do. And I said, well, what do you think I should do? And the first thing he said, make up a list of things that I can say to young people. I don't know where to start. So we've got a thing, it's the Ed Asner idea book on our website. And that's where he all of his suggestions. So just simple things like, what month is your birthday? Do you like dogs? Tell me what your favorite sport is. It doesn't matter, just making those connections. So just make that step, make that move. And if you're into organizing, go big. And if you're not, then go small and just talk to somebody who's walking home from school one day and find out how they're doing. But I would like to say before we end this, that both you and Sherry have been absolutely amazing with your organizations that's supporting this ever since I started it. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate your footprint. It's much bigger than mine. And the work that you do is really wonderful. And this is a really important piece of that work, I think.
Right. And it's all about continuing that conversation and letting people know more about it. So hopefully our listeners today will learn more about it. Go to your website, the intergeneration.ca. We'll put that in our show notes for people to connect and learn all about the programs that you have and the toolkits that you have to offer and resources so they can learn more. So thank you so much again for taking the time, Sharon, to talk with us about your programs, and Sherry again to be the co-host today. We really do appreciate you coming and sharing your time with us today.
Thank you, Sharon. This was great.
Yeah, thank you. It was lovely working with you again. Good luck.
To find more information and links to resources and programs mentioned in today's episode on intergenerational learning, please view our show notes. If you're interested in learning more about abuse prevention and protecting the rights and dignity of older adults, visit our website at eapon.ca. Be sure to check other episodes of our podcast on our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your podcast. Don't forget, if you like our Aging Vibrantly podcast, the best way to show your support and help us grow is to like, share, rate, or leave us a review. This podcast is made possible with funding by the Government of Canada's New Horizons for Seniors program, produced and edited by Todd Miller of the Podcast Experts, with the support of Lisa Whitfield, our project coordinator. Until next time, stay vibrant.